All right. Hey, my wife Sarah and I, when we got married 3.5 years ago, it was amazing. Who remembers when you got married? Okay, yes. So pumped. Your husband's not even here and you were excited, okay? Maybe that's why you're excited. I don't know. Yes, Mike is not here. Get that boy out of here. Okay, so when Sarah and I got married, it was amazing. We went on our honeymoon to Florida somewhere. I have no idea where it was. It was amazing. We ate waffles every single morning, okay? And they were like the $15 waffles, okay? I'm not talking about Eggos. Like, this was the stuff, okay? And we came back super broke, all right? But it was great. Our honeymoon was great. We came back from Florida. We flew back into Maryland, where Sarah is from. Her whole family lives in Maryland, so we flew back there, and we were getting ready to move to Knoxville, okay? Knoxville is where we first moved when we got married. And we get back into Maryland, and I had rented a budget truck, okay? I'd rented a budget truck, and when I told Sarah that I rented a budget truck, she flipped out on me because she was like, a budget truck? Why don't you rent a U-Haul truck? And I was like, babe, that's like, they're like different brands, okay? They do the same thing. She's like, no, you got the Great Value brand. You're so cheap. And I was like, no, babe, no, listen, okay, it's going to be okay. And then she also demanded that I not get just a U-Haul or a budget truck. She demanded I get the biggest U-Haul or budget truck that there was out there, okay? Now, up until this point, the biggest truck I had driven is like, like the small U-Haul that will fit like a dolly in the back, okay? And so I got the biggest budget truck that budget would give me because happy wife, happy life. Amen, okay? And so I got the biggest budget truck. We got back to Maryland, and I was telling Sarah, I was like, babe, have you ever moved before? Because there's no possible way you're going to fill up this budget truck. She's like, no, babe, you have no idea how much stuff I have. I was like, all right, well, here we go. So we go and we pack up the truck, and we literally have to tie everything to the walls because there's like nothing, okay? We could have driven her little Chevy Sonic into the back of that truck and saved me about $500 because we were newlyweds, right? So we had to spend every living, breathing moment together, right? Now she doesn't like me. She's like, no, I'm just kidding. But we had to spend every moment together. So Sarah was not about to drive her Chevy Sonic all the way to Knoxville, okay? So we had to go get the trailer part that hooks up to the budget truck. So we pack up all our stuff, and we're heading down to the local budget store, and we roll up at this budget place. And I guess it is Great Value because the way they treated me. I don't know. But I walked in there. I was like, hey, I rented a pull-along for my Chevy Sonic. And they're like, oh, yeah. And they couldn't just give me the kind that hooks up the front wheels. It hooks up the front wheels and then just carries the car behind it. They couldn't give me that kind. They had to give me the full trailer. Talking like you could have fit 2 Chevy Sonics on this trailer. Like a Chevy Sonic, I kid you not, is the size of this rug, okay? It is a tiny car, and we could have fit 2 of those on the back of this trailer. So I am driving this budget truck, and then I got to hook up this trailer, and the guy hands me a pamphlet inside. He gets me to pay and everything. That was my first mistake, to pay before, okay? So he hands me this pamphlet, and he says, hey, your trailer is right back over there. Just back up and hook her up. The instructions are in the pamphlet. And I was like, look, I don't know how it works in Maryland, but look at me. I do not know how to hook up this fancy trailer, okay? I'm wearing a flat bill cap. I don't know what I'm doing, okay? And so I'm telling this guy, and he's just looking at me. He's like, no, man, like liabilities, I can't do it for you. And I was like, okay, well, we are going to die on the way to Knoxville. This is going to be great, okay? So I get back there, and I get the pamphlet open, and I'm following the instructions. I hook it all up. We finally get her Chevy Sonic pulled on to the back of the trailer. I had just graduated from college, so my degree was good enough for me to read the pamphlet and follow the instructions, and we got everything on there, and we were getting ready to get out of there and head to Knoxville. And we're driving, and the first thing that happens is we're pulling out, and I'm shaking in my boots, guys. Like, I feel like I'm driving a semi-truck in Baltimore, okay? Like, people are shooting at you in Baltimore, right? And I'm driving this, what feels like a semi-truck, and I am freaking out, and my newlywed wife is sitting next to me, and she's all giddy, scooting all up close to me. I'm like, babe, listen, I need some space, like trying to drive this thing. I am 10 and 2, and my trailer is swerving, and I'm like, my God, help me, my God. And I'm praying as hard as I've ever prayed, trying to get 9 hours to Knoxville, and literally half of this trip half of this trip, I do not look forward one time. I am concentrating on my rearview mirrors to make sure this Chevy Sonic is not, one, flying off of the trailer, and two, not swerving into the guy next to me, because God only knows if I have insurance. I don't know what I signed. I just showed up and they gave me what they gave me. And so I'm sitting there, I'm looking back and forth, not paying attention to what's in front of me, and I'm just looking in my rearview mirrors trying to figure out, okay, is my trailer still attached? Am I going to hit somebody? Am I in the line? So if I wasn't in the lines, I would swerve this way, and then I'd go too far. And so I'd swerve back again and go back and forth, back and forth. And I was concentrating, half of my trip was concentrated on the rear view mirrors, not what was in front of me. You know where I'm going. Most of us, get this, a lot of us in our life, we look backwards to our past as we're moving forward. It's hard to move forward if we're always worried about what did happen. It's hard to move forward in our life with Jesus. It's hard to follow Him more closely if we're always looking back in our rearview mirrors at the mistakes that we made or the good old days. If we're always looking back at the good old days of what was awesome in our life and how successful we were, it's going to be hard to be successful where we are. If we're always looking back to the shame in our life, in our past, it's going to be hard to move forward in the grace of today. See, it wasn't until halfway through this trip that I realized, man, if I will keep my eyes focused on the road in front of me, and if you've driven a trailer before, you know this, right? Or if you've driven a semi like I have, okay, I've driven a semi, toot toot, all right? So if you've driven these things before, you know that if you look forward, you're going to go straighter than if you looked backwards. It wasn't until halfway through this trip that I realized, man, if I will concentrate on what is in front of me and I will stop worrying about what's to the side and stop worrying about what's behind and stop worrying about what's miles ahead, if I will concentrate on the moment I'm in, I'm going to go straight. The same is true for our life. When we decide to live in the moment that we've been given, when we decide to own the moment we're in, instead of worrying about the past or worrying about the future, when we decide to live in the moment, is when the car of our life stops swerving. We stop focusing on everything else and start focusing on what God has given us today. Today. See, many of us, myself especially included, see, we try to change the past and we try to predict the future, only to find that you can't change what's already happened, and you can't always predict what's going to happen. The only thing that I have control over in my life, the only thing you have control over in your life, is the present moment that you are in right now. Right now. See, I want to say something that you may not get at first, but we're going to unpack it, okay? It's very simple. The past, my past and your past, the past doesn't like you. I'm sorry. The past doesn't like you. The future doesn't know you. The future doesn't know you. And the present is all we got. The present is all you got. Many times we get so caught up in what happened last year or what might happen next year, we forget to live this year. And when we forget to live where we are in the moment, that moment becomes the past that we look back at in shame. And when we forget to live in the moment, our future becomes the moment that we never worried about. The moment we are in right now is the only moment that we have to worry about. See, many times we neglect the present for what did happen or what could happen. That's the middle area. I've titled this sermon, The Moment Gap. The Moment Gap. That's the middle area where a lot of us get stuck. It's not where we used to be, but it's not where we want to be, right? We've been stuck here before where you are in the moment that you presently have and you know the past. So many times we get sucked back into the past because we know what happened. It's comfortable there. We know what happened in the past. It brings some sort of comfort because we've been there. We know that. The present is a little bit messier, right? So we go back to our past because we know it. Or many of us, we go into our future and we start to fantasize about our future because we like that. We can make it what we want it to be because guess what? We haven't been there yet. So you can look at your future and say, man, I'm going to have a Ferrari. I'm going to have a beautiful wife. I'm going to have the best kids in the world. And you don't have to do anything right now to fantasize about tomorrow. And so many times we get stuck in this middle area where we're either being pulled towards the past and what we know or being pulled towards the future and what we like. And many times those two things make us neglect where we currently are, the only moment in our life that we have total control over is the moment gap, the moment that you're in right now. There's a story in Scripture that we're going to look at today that illustrates this perfectly. There's a guy named Joseph in the Old Testament. It's the same Joseph with the coat of many colors, okay? So like the VBS Joseph you learned about where he had the coat of many colors and that was it. You're like, oh, cool, he's got some cool swag. Okay, that's cool. No, like that's not where his story ends. Joseph's story goes like this. Let me show you. Ups and downs. Ups, really high ups, and super low downs. Really, 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 really high ups and downs. His story looks a lot like my story and your story. Joseph had a life that went up and down. Joseph was the son, the last son, the baby boy. We got any babies in the house? You're the last one born, okay? Yes, okay, yeah. Let me explain something real quick. Joseph was the baby boy, okay? All his siblings hated him. So your siblings probably hate you. I don't know. So no, I'm just kidding. Joseph was the baby boy of Jacob. Joseph was the baby boy of Jacob, and Joseph was the most loved son of Jacob. Like, by far. And his brothers knew it, so his brothers hated him. So Joseph was given this coat of many colors, which was super expensive. It wasn't just something to just get. No, like Jacob had to go get this, and it was a high quality. He got this coat of many colors. He gave it to his son Joseph, and Joseph flaunted it. He wore it around, and his brothers didn't like it. So one day, Joseph is going to Dothan, this other town where he's going to head towards his brothers to give his brothers something. And he's on his way there. And his brothers see him from afar and they say, man, there's Joseph. You know what? I don't like that guy. Let's kill him. Let's kill him. Then one of his brothers speaks up. He says, man, that's our own flesh and blood. Like, come on, bro. Let's back up a little bit. Let's put him into slavery instead because that's just as good. So they decide to put him into slavery. And Joseph has ran all the way to Dothan. He meets up with them, and they rip off his coat of many colors, and they throw him into slavery. They sell him to some Ishmaelite slave traders, and he's in slavery. He ends up being bought by Potiphar. Potiphar is a ruler in Egypt, and so Potiphar now has Joseph as a slave. Well, Joseph was owning the moment while he was a slave. He was in slavery. Life was not good. He owned the moment, and he was promoted to the head of Potiphar's house. So Joseph has gone from super high with his dad to low being sold into slavery. Now he's high again. He's at the top of Potiphar's house. And then Potiphar's wife comes on to him. All right? Potiphar's wife comes on to him, and Potiphar's wife comes to him, and he's like, hey, you need to sleep with me because you look good, Joseph, and like I like you, and I'm Potiphar's wife, like do what I say. And Joseph says, nah, I'm not about that, right? So Joseph sprints away. Scripture says that he fled. So Joseph flees, and she rips off his coat as he's leaving, and she goes to Potiphar and says, hey, Potiphar, Joseph ran away, but the reason he ran away, look at this coat. He was trying to rape me. So Potiphar goes, finds Joseph, and throws him into prison. So now Joseph finds himself going from this high, now he's at the lowest of the low. Dude's in the prison, okay? He's at the bottom of the prison. He's not just a slave anymore. Now he's a prisoner. So Joseph is in prison now. He meets two guys, a cupbearer and a baker who are there, and they're talking and stuff, and they both have dreams. And they come to Joseph, and Joseph says, yeah, I can interpret that dream because God is with me. God can interpret that dream through me. So Joseph interprets both of their dreams. It's good for one dude, it's bad for another. The baker dies because Joseph said that's what your dream means. Came true. He died, so he was pretty mad at Joseph, I can imagine. And then the cupbearer, he lived and went back to Pharaoh's house. So I'm sure he was pretty pumped about Joseph, right? So he leaves the prison, goes back to Pharaoh's home, and Joseph The only thing he asks, he says, hey, guys, listen, if these things come true, now, Baker, I'm not talking to you because you're going to die. But cupbearer, if this comes true and you get back, listen to me. Would you please just remember me? Something happens, you can throw my name out there. Give me a 5-star review on Facebook. It'd be great. And so, cupbearer's gone, and Joseph stays in the prison for 3 more years. Cupbearer bro has a terrible memory. He forgets to tell the Pharaoh about Joseph, so Joseph is in prison for 3 more years. Until finally Pharaoh has a dream. And Pharaoh's dream is so crazy, like none of his magicians, none of his people can figure out what this thing means. And so the cupbearer is like, boom, hey, I remember I had a dream and my friend had a dream and they both came true because the dude is still buried. He's dead. The baker's dead and I'm alive serving you. Like this Joseph guy, his God answered my dream and interpreted my dream. Maybe he could help you out, Pharaoh. So Pharaoh calls up Joseph, and Joseph goes to Pharaoh, and he interprets the dream. He says, hey, there's going to be famine across all the land, but if you listen to the instructions that my God has given me, then everything is going to be good. And Pharaoh's like, man, okay, well, you know, that sounds good. Like you interpret these guys' dreams right. And so it starts to come true. And so Pharaoh says, man, I got to have somebody to head up all of Egypt and all of these things that need to happen. And Pharaoh chooses Joseph. And so Joseph is now second in command of all of Egypt. This little Jewish boy that went from slavery to prison to the palace is now the second in command of all of Egypt. He's the second in command of all of Egypt. Joseph's life is like this sitcom that will not end, and there's always cliffhangers, and it gets on your nerves because it's like down, high, low, high. And his life is very similar to our lives. Has anybody been low before? Has anybody been high before? I'm talking about in your life, not like drugs. But that's okay. It's the perfect place for imperfect people. Joseph has been high and Joseph has been low. But there's an aspect of this story. Like I may have just recapped that and you're all like, okay, I know the story of Joseph. Okay, I've been in church my entire life. Okay, well, good for you. Okay, but there's an aspect of this story that I had never seen before. And you know, maybe you've seen it before, but I had never seen this. And this is the aspect I want to talk to you about today. I was driving down the road a few weeks ago. I hadn't read the story of Joseph in a while. And it just like hit me like a ton of bricks. Like this is something I'd never seen. So I go back looking at the story and I find this little statement I want to make to you that I've already made. But the past doesn't like you. The future doesn't know you. And the present is all you got. The past doesn't like you. Number one, the past doesn't like you. Joseph's brothers did not like him. They hated him. Like you might have a brother that doesn't like you, but did they sell you into slavery? I don't think so. Like Joseph's brothers were bad, man. They did not like him. In fact, Genesis chapter 37 verse 4 says this. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. They hated him. Joseph was not like their father loved him so much more than them that they hated him. They hated him. In fact, it goes on in chapter 37 verse 18. It says this. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Instead of hurting him, one of his brothers said, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. His brothers agreed. Now get this. Here's where we're going to bring this in. The past doesn't like you. Imagine being Joseph, and for 3 years you're stuck in the bottom of the prison. And your cupbearer friend is gone, and your baker friend is dead, and you're sitting there. And when we feel like we're in prison, what do we do a lot of times? We look back. We look back over our life. Man, how did I get here? And Joseph is looking back on his life, and he's looking back and he's seeing, man, my brothers sold me into slavery. My brothers didn't like me. The past didn't like him, and the truth of the matter is for each and every one of us is that the past doesn't like us either. And here's the reason why. Why doesn't the past like you? Because you aren't there anymore. The past doesn't like me because I'm not there anymore. See, we all get sucked into the past from time to time, where the past tries to pull us back in. Like maybe, this has never happened to any of you guys, but it probably has. Maybe you had an ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend. You creep on their Instagram, right, to make sure that their life is not as good as yours. Yeah, some of you millennials are like, oh gosh, yes, you're right, I do that. No, or maybe like you in high school, you were the stuff. You wore your Letterman jacket around everywhere and people looked up to you, and now you're just kind of wallowing around in life. You don't know which road to take in your life, and so you look back. You feel like you're in a prison in the present, so you look back in your past to find the validation that you need. See, a lot of times we look back in our past, but our past doesn't like us because we can't fully get back there. So what does the past try to do? Our past tries to get us to live back there while operating right here. The past wants you to think and dwell on it, not where you're going, not where you are. The past wants you back. And it's going to do this in two ways, one of two ways, maybe both. See, Joseph's brothers decided not to kill him. They decided to enslave him instead. See, our past doesn't necessarily want to kill us. Our past wants to enslave us. It wants to enslave us through one of two ways, and here they are, quickly. One, the good old days. Look at your neighbor and say, good old days, good old days. The good old days. Back in the day, man, the past will get you to concentrate on the good old days of your past to get you away from the moment you should be living in right now. The past wants you to look back and say, man, I was successful then, and I'll never be successful now. The past wants you to concentrate on what went well back then instead of what could happen well right now. The past wants you to think that the best days of your life are gone. That you peaked in high school and you will never find another date. The past wants you to think that the Letterman days of your life were the Betterman days of your life, and you'll never get any better. You'll never find anything better. The past wants you to dwell on the good old days. But get this, when we are concentrating on the past, when we are concentrating on the fame of yesterday, we cannot live in the grace of today. When you're concentrating on all the things that happened to you, little things or big things or whatever you're trying to pick out of your past, the marriage that you had in your past, but now you find yourself divorced in the present, you're looking back and you're saying, man, those were the good old days. That is going to steal you of the grace God wants to give you today. Past wants to enslave you through the good old days. The past wants to enslave you through the shameful days. The shameful days. See, our past will enslave us if we let it. The past wants us to concentrate on the shame that we've gone through. The sin in your life that you can't get over, that was the sin that you struggled with then. The past wants you to think about that in the present and think, man, you'll never be better than that sin. You'll never be stronger than that sin. The divorce that you went through in the past, that shame wants you to carry it over into the present and say that you have no chance, no choice, no luck in this life. That is what will define you. That is what the past wants to do. It wants to enslave you through the shame of yesterday. But as long as we are concentrating on the shame of yesterday, we cannot live in the grace of today. When we're concentrating on the fame or the shame of yesterday, the grace of today will not be present in our life because we're living in the past. See, Joseph had been chasing his brothers to Dothan. He'd been chasing his brothers, trying to get to his brothers, trying to get there as fast as possible. And once he finally got there, he found that he was out of energy and he was outnumbered. The past wants you to continually chase it because you'll be out of energy and you'll be outnumbered because there's more past things that have happened than moments you are currently in. The past wants you to chase it, run out of energy, and so you're easier to enslave through the good old days or the shameful days. But see, we can learn one other thing from Joseph's story is not only the past doesn't like you, but second, the future doesn't know you. The future doesn't know you. 20 years later from this moment of his slavery, Joseph is 20 years older. He's 20 years wiser. He's been through some stuff. He's been through the highs and lows of life. He's experienced some stuff. He's no longer a slave. He's no longer in prison. In fact, God has promoted Joseph from the prison to the palace. And now Joseph is at the top of his game. But something happens to Joseph that he never saw coming. His brothers rolled up to his front door. These are the cats that tried to kill him. These are the guys that wanted him dead. They sold him into slavery. And now they are at his front door begging for food because only Egypt had the food because of the leadership and the blessing of God on Joseph's life. In fact, in chapter 42, verse 8, it says this: although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. See, the past doesn't like you because you're not there anymore. It wants you back. It's like that crazy ex-girlfriend. The past wants you back so bad. It wants you to live there. But the future doesn't know you. You know why the future doesn't know you? Because you're not there yet. The future doesn't know you because you're not there yet. I'm not there yet. And many of us, we live our lives, and I'm not talking about planning, and I'm not talking about vision. Those things are awesome, and we need a vision for our life. We need a plan for our future. What I'm talking about is the fantasies that we can live vicariously through because we don't like our present. It feels like we're in prison right now, so we want to look to our future and create this fantasy in our mind that we'll never actually get to because we're not doing anything today. See, there's one of two ways that your future wants to imprison you. First one is through fantasies of the future. Fantasies of the future. I want you to look towards the future and fantasize about what could be while procrastinating the present. See, if you procrastinate your present away, then you will never get to the future you're fantasizing about. You can have the best future in your mind you've ever seen. I mean, like, you could look at the future and Oprah would be jealous of your future. And you're looking at it and it's amazing, right? But if you procrastinate away your present because you're concentrating on the future, you will never get to that future. I will never get to that future if we procrastinate away our present. The future wants us to procrastinate our present. And then second, the future wants us to worry away our present. This is 2017, right? Like, the future is now, right? It's 2017, we worry. It's like worry is just like a thing now, right? Like everybody's always worried or anxious or stressed. It's just like all around us. What's happening in our future, we're worrying about it. Like Sarah, whenever she found out she was pregnant, like she started worrying then about where Cash was going to go to school. Okay, like, boom, I'm pregnant. Where's he going to go to school? My Lord, you know? And so, like, worry is all around us. The future is full of worry, and the struggle is real. And so many times the future wants us to look ahead and worry about what hasn't even happened yet. And when we worry about what hasn't even happened yet, we are paralyzed in our present. When you're paralyzed in your present, you can't do anything to fix the worry that is happening in your future. So when we concentrate on our future and we worry about it, our present is paralyzed and we can't do anything about it. The past doesn't like you, the future doesn't know you. And finally, the present is all you got. Present is all you got. Like I was driving the budget truck down the interstate When I looked in the rearview mirror or I tried to look too many miles ahead, I couldn't get where I was wanting to go. But when I concentrated on the moment I was in, when I concentrated on where I was going right then, is when I started to go straight. The present is all we've got. The present is all we've got. We've got to learn to own the moments we're in. The moment right now for you may look like a dirty diaper for your baby, but one day that moment will turn into a future that is a young man or young woman. So you got to own the dirty diaper now in order for them to get to the future that God has for them. The moment right now may look like beans and rice and beans so you can get out of debt, but that's not for anything. That's because the future has potential, but you got to own the moment you're in right now. We've got to own the moment when the good old days come back up. We're going to wrap all the way back around when the good old days come back up and keep us from living in the present. We've got to learn to drop it and move on. Easier said than done. Joseph, when he was promoted to the palace, he was over everybody in Egypt. You know what Joseph had the resources, he had the potential to do? Joseph could have dropped everything he was doing and he could have turned his face and walked all the way back to where his brothers were to pick up his coat of many colors. Man, I love that coat. My daddy loved me so much, he made me a coat. I got to go back and get that thing. I got the resources to do it. I'm going to go do that. But you know what would have happened if Joseph would have turned around and left Egypt and gone back to his father's land to get the coat of many colors? Years later, when Joseph should have been in Egypt preparing for the famine to take care of his family, Joseph would have been worrying about the coat of many colors in his past, and his brothers would have all died. His family would have died because he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Joseph was never supposed to go back to the coat of many colors of his past. And we're never supposed to go back to the good old days. Were they good? Yes, that's great, awesome. But my gosh, quit talking about high school and live now. The moment you're living in right now is more important than any good old days you've ever had. Because if you don't live in the moment now, you'll never have more good old days. When the shameful days rear their ugly head back up, and the sin of your past comes and tries to accuse you that you'll never be what God wants you to be because your past is full of shame. You have screwed up. You have messed up. That divorce was not your wife's fault. It was your fault. And so you'll never get married again because you're not worthy of another spouse. You'll never be out of debt because you spent all the credit card and you got all this debt mounted up. It's your fault. When the shame of the past comes back up, we've got to learn to drop it and move on. Our God is not an accusing God. Satan is the accuser. We've got to learn to drop it and move on. Just like Joseph fled from the sin of his past. He fled from the woman who was trying to have an affair with him. He fled from her. We've got to learn to rip off the coat and flee towards what God wants for our life. To own that moment. To own that moment. I'm not going to live in my past because this moment is too important. I'm creating my past by owning this moment. I'm not going to go back to my past. I'm going to own it now. See, there's more grace and there's more favor today than there ever was sin or success yesterday. When the future comes and the future wants you to fantasize and procrastinate away your present, when it wants you to procrastinate your present so you never get to the potential that God has for you, we have got to learn. We have got to learn to concentrate not on the future that we don't know yet, but concentrate on the moment that we have right now. And finally, when the worry of tomorrow comes and invades the moment of today, we've got to combat worry with worship. It's been said before that worry and worship are two sides of the same coin. That you do them the same way, but the concentration is different. See, when you're concentrating on worry, you're looking to the future to fix your problems. But when you're concentrating on worship, you're looking to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to fix your problems in the present. Worrying and looking to the future, I'm sorry to break it to you, but the future is not going to fix your current problems. The only thing that can fix your current problems is owning the moment and looking to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, who owned the moment on the cross, and He laid down His life for you and for me. He laid down His life for the moments that we live in today. He laid down His life for the past shameful days that you can't get over. He laid down His life for the worry that you cannot escape, that keeps you up every single night. He laid down His life in the moment. In the moment when He was on the cross, He didn't call angels to take Him down. He didn't fake die. Jesus took on every sin. He took on all the shame. He took on all the worry. He took on every bit of distractions we have in our life. And in that moment, Jesus said, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to kick down the gates of hell. And I'm going to make a way for you and for me to own the grace in the moment. There's more grace today than there ever will be problems in your future. There's more grace today than there ever will be great things that happen in your future. Today is the day to own the moment. The song we sang about, the last song we sang about, it says Emmanuel. Emmanuel, He is here with us. You know what Emmanuel means? It means God with us. You know what it doesn't mean? God was with us. You know what it doesn't mean? God will be with us. You know what it means? It means God is with us now. The moment you're living in now where you feel like you're in slavery, the moment you live in now where you feel like you're in prison, the moment you live in now where you feel like you're at the mountaintop of your spirituality, Emmanuel, God is with you in that moment. God is with you today. God is with us through Jesus Christ, His Son.